Doma Sports Talk Worldwide with some news from the world of boxing. So y'all know what time it is. You ain't in a rush to get concussed. Now we got some good Canelo news, right? Middleweight slash super middleweight news. Canelo Alvarez is relinquishing his WBA title in the middleweight division. He's going to fight at 168 now officially. His trainer Minozo says it. Canelo is more comfortable at 168, so that's where he's going to be. Good, we have some clarity, right? And finally vacating these belts and seeing what's happening. Here's my issue. With WBA is just going to let Ryota Murata, he's the regular champion in the WBA. He's going to be the official champion now instead of letting someone fight for the vacant title. That would be a little bit better, I think. The title is vacant. It's a major title. These regular titles, similar to the franchise title, is just, bringing in confusion. Most of the time, if you have a champion already, then you don't need a regular champion, right? We were talking about that so many times. It really doesn't matter. But a regular champion, most of them aren't really the second best guy in the WBA. And an example would be the heavyweight champion of the world. That would be Anthony Joshua, WBA style. And the regular champion is Manuel Char, right? Do you have Manuel Char anywhere in your top 10 or maybe even your top 20 in heavyweights, right? Or Roy Fielding, right? The guy Canelo beat in the super middleweight division. There's a couple of regular champions that we consider to be good champions, but they're not the major champions, but we consider them to be good or great fighters, and that would be Guillermo Rigondeaux. Due to the circumstance, he's a regular champion at the 118-pound division. He was stripped of his 122-pound title, which was ridiculous, but that's another story. And I think we'd say Gervonta Davis. A lot of people, are high on Gervonta Davis, failing to realize that he's not a real champion at lightweight. He's a regular champion. But, other than those, most of the time the regular guy is not someone who we consider to be the second best guy in the WBA. So I think the WBA should, in this case, simply let someone fight for it. Look who's the WBA's number one. It's Chris Eubank Jr. over there training with Roy Jones since the pandemic, waiting for a fight. He's number one. Let him and Murata fight for the title, right? For the real title. That's what I think needs to be done. And, but as far as Canelo doing what he's going to do, and, it doesn't really matter what Canelo does right now. I just think it's, really has very little to do with boxing, what Canelo's up to right now. I mean, bottom line, okay, now he's at 168, but at 154 and 168, he wouldn't fight Charlo or Andrade. And you just don't see number one pound for pounds because people are, complaining that Terrence Crawford is number one pound for pound, according to ESPN. Other outlets have Canelo number one, and I was just, looking at number one pound for pounds through the history, and, I don't really see any, except maybe a Riddick Bowe, for example, who have someone who's in their division who they're just simply not going to fight, right? Lennox Bowe wasn't going to fight Lennox Lewis. It's just the way it was. But most of the times, maybe Roy Jones Jr., there he had a guy, Dariusz Miskachowski, from Poland, that was undefeated in one of his weight divisions. But Roy was handling, he was number one pound for pound, handling his business all over. I don't think fear was, something that you were going to say. But those are just some that jump out at you. If you're thinking of Jose Napoles, I didn't really know. It's before my time, really. Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, Roberto Duran, Muhammad Ali again, Duran again, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson, Pernell Whitaker, Jose Cesar Chavez, Riddick Bowe, I mentioned, Evander Holyfield, Pernell Whitaker again, Roy Jones, Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones, Bernard Hopkins again, Mayweather, Roman Gonzalez, okay, Pacquiao, Andre Ward, Gennady Golovkin, there's one. Vasyl Lomachenko, there's another one. Canelo, Lomachenko, and Canelo. I think Canelo stands out right now of having someone who, two people in his division who he's just simply not going to fight, not even trying to be unified. We'll see what happens at 168. Most of those champions there, like I said, save Riddick Bowe, for example, aren't going to have, or Gennady Golovkin, because he's not fighting Charlo or Andrade either. But most of those guys are not going to have somebody in their division or two people in their division who they're not going to fight. right? We don't know everybody's exact history. You know, that's before Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. But most of these guys were not going to have someone, you know, in their divisions just basically chasing them out of the division as there and with belts, right? Trying to become unified, and these guys who are number one pound for pound are in the way of unification or undisputed. And I think that's the case in Canelo's case, definitely, right? So if Canelo wants to be, you know, 168 right now, I've said it in other videos. Let's see what happens when those people at 168 become people that he doesn't want to fight. You know, like right now, he's going to be hell bent on fighting Billy Joe Saunders, right? After Yildirim, why are we even fighting him? We talked about it. So he has to fight a mandatory in Yildirim, but did not have to fight a mandatory in Charlo, right? Same thing as John Golovkin. Hey, we're calling in to request that Samaretta is considered a mandatory when he wasn't. That's the same thing Canelo did. He called into the WBC to request to fight for the vacant WBC title against Yildirim. Instead of WBC saying, no, Canelo, we're going to let Benavidez fight for his title, really, against Yildirim, and then you can fight the winner of that. You know, it's just so many shenanigans going on that it makes really no sense to even talk about these guys with legitimately with fights. There's just a few fighters that you should be talking about. The mainstream guys, there's too much corruption going on around them, and it's just something you really can't really call sport anymore. So let's see what happens going forward. I don't know if you know any stories about any of the former pound for pound number ones, if they were people there in their divisions, you know, one or two guys that they wouldn't fight, that they just were hell bent on not fighting. We don't know all of the things, but if you do know something, let me know. See what's happening on that, because you know, I'm looking at some of these champions, I'm not seeing that really, right? Except I said, you know, one or two cases. Let's see what happens going forward. I think that Murata should have to fight Chris Eubank Jr. for that vacant strap, right? Instead of them just giving it to someone, because we're looking at all this giving, right? Giving Gennady Golovkin the Samaretta fight and saying it's a mandatory. Giving the Canelo the Yildirim fight, saying it's a mandatory. Giving Canelo the WBC title at 168 pounds when he was fighting for the WBA, right? Giving Lomachenko or Canelo a franchise title so they don't have to fight formidable guys. And the list can go on and on. We can even talk about doping or whatever. It's just, you know, I'm tired right now. I don't even want to get into it anymore because it's starting to be overkill. Doma Sports Talk worldwide. And we up out of here, y'all.